Freeze is the most hated status ailment in the Pokémon franchise, and it's easy to see why. Unlike every other status ailment, Freeze cannot be directly applied by a status move. Freeze is exclusive to the secondary effects of attacks, and the chance to apply Freeze on moves like Ice Beam is only 10%. But on the rare occasion that a Freeze does land, it is incredibly impactful. Freeze works differently from game to game and has been reworked quite a few times, but the general idea is that your Pokémon is completely immobilized for a few turns. A lucky freeze can randomly turn a lost game into an easy win out of absolutely nowhere, just as a byproduct of clicking Ice Beam, which is a commonly used and powerful move just for its damage alone. The fear of that random 10% freeze swinging the game completely can feel really stupid. RNG is a fundamental part of Pokémon, and in many cases you have a solid level of control when it comes to reducing risk and mitigating that randomness. Many RNG effects in Pokémon serve to enhance decision making and create interesting and even fun dynamics. But Freeze does not really fit that description. There are some ways to play around Freeze, but a 10% chance is not high enough to make that worth it in many situations. Most of the time when a freeze happens, it is unintentional. You can fish for freeze chances in some games or throw out an Ice Beam in a lost endgame, hoping for that lucky freeze to bail you out, but I don't think these interactions are particularly fun or valuable for the competitive experience. A lot of weird mechanics from the earlier installments of Pokémon have been reworked and modernized over the years, and a lot of players think the same should happen to Freeze. And perhaps a proof of concept for what a reworked Freeze might look like was seen in the spin-off game Pokémon Legends Arceus. In this game, the freeze status ailment was replaced with a new concept called Frostbite. All moves that used to apply freeze now apply to Frostbite instead in this game. Frostbite has an effect very similar to Burn. When a Pokémon is burned, they lose 1/16 of their HP per turn and have their physical damage output halved. When a Pokémon is frostbitten, they also lose 1/16 of their HP per turn and have their special attack damage output halved. So what if this Frostbite effect also replaced freeze completely in the main series Pokémon games? Would that be an improvement? This new status ailment makes sense as a counterpart to Burn, and also isn't nearly as high impact as Freeze is. Freeze will instantly swing a game whenever it's applied, but this Frostbite effect is much tamer. You could still lose if you get frostbitten on an important special attacker, but on many Pokémon, getting frostbitten isn't much of an ailment at all. Unlike Burn, there is no status move that directly applies Frostbite in Pokémon Legends Arceus, but there are ways to apply Frostbite more reliably. Hisui and Zoroark's signature move Bitter Malice, when translated into Gen 9, was simply a ghost-type special attack with a 100% chance to lower the enemy's attack stat by 1 stage. But originally in Pokémon Legends Arceus, this move had a 30% chance to inflict the Frostbite effect. On top of that, it had an effect similar to the move Hex, dealing double damage to status enemies. The move Bleakwind Storm also originally applied Frostbite to the enemy. The chance to apply Frostbite was also higher on most of the Ice-type moves that usually would apply Freeze. Blizzard had a significant 30% chance to apply Frostbite, as did Ice Punch, and Ice Beam had a 20% chance to inflict Frostbite. Pokémon Legends Arceus was designed quite differently to the main series games, with a unique battle system of its own, and since it's only a single-player experience, multiplayer balance was not really considered. But if Frostbite was translated to the main games with all of these values remaining the same, it might be too powerful. Ninetales Alola would be significantly buffed if it had a 30% chance to inflict Frostbite from Blizzard after immediately setting snow on the field. Ice-type attacks would probably start to be used on defensive Pokémon purely for that Frostbite chance, and this could become like a new Scald. If Bleakwind Storm had a 30% chance to apply Frostbite, this would be a huge problem in doubles battles, where the move hits both opponents. While the status ailment itself isn't as high impact as Freeze, with these higher chances to proc, it might actually end up making the game worse. The rise of safe moves with high impact secondary effects has already served to make competitive gameplay less interesting in my opinion, especially in singles battles. If they did implement Frostbite in place of Freeze, they would need to be very careful about how exactly they handled it. They'd have to consider the proc chance of Frostbite on each move and be wary about who they give these powerful moves to. In my opinion, a complete mechanical overhaul of many antiquated mechanics has been long overdue in the main Pokémon games. Rather than scrambling to create some new gimmicky mechanic like Dynamax or Terastallization that the game is forced to center around, I really think they should shift their focus towards ironing out and reworking some of the more frustrating and poorly designed parts of their existing systems. And to go even further, I think that 10% status proc chances on moves like Ice Beam, Flamethrower, and Thunderbolt should just be removed entirely. These moves are already used primarily for their power and accuracy, with the secondary effect being a random swing that can happen out of nowhere. If you're choosing Flamethrower over other fire-type moves, such as Fire Blast or Lava Plume, you are making a decision. Fire Blast gives you higher power at the cost of accuracy and consistency. Lava Plume gives you that valuable burn chance at the cost of power, and Flamethrower is the middle point. If the player wants a burn chance, I think they should just choose Lava Plume. A 10% burn chance tacked onto a move that is already fine on its own feels unnecessary. In line with other moves like Discharge and Lava Plume with 30% proc chances, I think if Frostbite exists, there should be an Ice type move with a similar 80 power and 30% Frostbite chance. It would be nice if Ice and Fire types were both immune to the Frostbite effect, so there's some natural counterplay. And alongside this, the Ice type should get some long overdue defensive buffs. I'm not sure exactly what these should be, but maybe get rid of one of the weaknesses and add a resistance or two. I think this would be a nice way to give Ice types more identity. The most successful Ice types in the modern Pokemon games tend to be offensive, since that's the only area they can ever really thrive, and it would be nice if that finally changed. It has often been an advantage of special attackers that they dodge many of the mechanics that plague physical attackers, like Burn and Intimidate. So having a new tool to cripple special attackers would also be welcome. If they reduce the situations where those annoying 10% swings happen, add enough natural counterplay, and introduce this new status effect in a way that gives Ice types more to offer, that would be fantastic. I would love to have more tools and see fun new interactions and gameplay arise from them. But to do that, it wouldn't be quite as simple as just replacing one status ailment with a new one and calling it a day. The Frostbite status effect sounds like a straight up superior alternative to the more frustrating freeze, but if they don't implement this status effect intelligently, it could end up being unbalanced and creating even more frustrating gameplay than freeze did. I've been disappointed with the experience of modern Pokemon games in general, where it feels like new mechanics and new Pokemon are brute forced into the forefront and shoved into our faces. While there are interesting new ideas and creative Pokemon designs in the modern games, they are completely overshadowed by new, flashy, power-crept Pokemon and these overpowered generational mechanics that usually serve to make them even more powerful. I would really like it if they returned their focus back to the most fundamental mechanics in the franchise. Not only freeze, but sleep and paralysis could use a rework of some sort as well. But what do you think, folks? Is Pokemon a perfect work of art as it is? Or is this franchise in need of some change? Let me know down below, and thank you for watching. This video topic was the winner of a poll on Patreon, and was suggested by Serenity.